The old woman stood outside the grand hotel gate. Luxury cars parked everywhere. Rich men and women laughed loudly under shining lights. But her eyes searched for only one person, her son. The same boy she once carried on her back through hunger, sickness, and pain. The same child she nearly died trying to raise. At that moment, she finally saw him, standing proudly among wealthy businessmen in an expensive black suit. Her face lit up with joy instantly. Tears filled her eyes as she struggled towards him with trembling hands. But the moment their eyes met, the young man looked away, as if he had never seen her before. And within seconds, security guards grabbed the old woman violently and dragged her out, while the guests laughed. She did not fight them. She only kept staring at her son, hoping he would speak, hoping he would stop them, but he remained silent. That was the night Florence's heart truly broke. Years earlier, before wealth destroyed love, Florence was only a poor widow struggling to survive. Every morning before sunrise, she carried a basket of orange through muddy roads. Her slippers were worn out. Her wrappers had faded from years of washing, yet her tired eyes still carried determination. Because at home waited the only reason she kept fighting, her little son Patrick. Inside her tiny room, Patrick sat on the floor every night reading old textbooks under a weak lantern light. Hunger twisted his stomach often, but he never complained. He already knew his mother had skipped meals so that he could remain in school. And every night after he slept, Florence knelt beside his bed and prayed quietly, with tears streaming down her cheeks. She prayed for only one thing, that her son Patrick would never suffer the life she suffered. She washed clothes for wealthy families. She sold fruits beneath the burning sun. She carried heavy loads in crowded markets, despite her aging body. Some evenings she returned home coughing heavily, with swollen legs and trembling hands. But whenever Patrick showed her good grades, her pain disappeared instantly. The villagers often mocked her. They warned her that too much sacrifice for a child could end up in heartbreak. Some even said to her, children easily forget the people who suffered for them. But Florence ignored them all. She believed her sacrifice would one day become blessings. Then, one afternoon, everything changed. Patrick received a scholarship to study abroad. The entire village celebrated wildly. Florence cried uncontrollably as she hugged the scholarship letter tightly against her chest. For the first time in years, she allowed herself to dream of a better future. She borrowed money she could not repay just to buy Patrick a decent suitcase and a pair of shoes. Before Patrick departed, she held his hands tightly and prayed over him for hours, with tears pouring down from her eyes. Then Patrick left for a world far bigger than the village they knew. At first, Patrick called often. He promised to return. He promised to build her a better house. He promised she would never suffer again. But slowly, the calls became fewer. Weeks turned into months. Months turned into years. Then, one day, news spread across the village like wildfire that Patrick had become extremely wealthy overseas. People spoke of luxury cars, expensive suits, giant mansions, and powerful business connections. The villagers danced joyfully for Florence, believing that her suffering had finally come to an end. But strangely, nothing changed. Her roof still leaked during rain. Her clothes remained old and faded. Food was still scarce in her home. Then people began to whisper, why has the rich son abandoned the woman who sacrificed everything for him. One evening, after hearing that Patrick had returned to Nigeria for a major business event, Florence gathered the little strength left in her body and traveled to the city. The stressful journey nearly broke her, but nothing could stop a mother from seeing her child. When she finally arrived at the Grand Hotel, flashing cameras surrounded wealthy guests and luxury vehicles filled the entrance. Then she saw him, her son, tall, rich, powerful, and completely transformed. Tears filled her eyes immediately. She struggled through the crowd softly, calling his name. But the moment Patrick saw her, fear and embarrassment covered his face. He glanced nervously at his wealthy friends and business partners. The dirty wrapper she wore, the cracked slippers, the weak appearance of a woman who raised him from nothing, it all embarrassed him. And then he did the unthinkable. He pretended not to know her. Florence froze completely. The smile on her face disappeared slowly as security guards dragged her away, while people laughed and mocked her. From a distance, she looked back one final time, but her son could not even look into her eyes. That night, heavy rain fell once again. Florence sat alone inside her small room, staring at the only photograph they ever took together. Tears rolled endlessly down from her cheeks as she whispered another prayer. But this prayer was different, not for wealth, not for success. She prayed that her son would never experience the pain of forgetting where he came from. Days later, tragedy struck. While carrying a heavy basket in the market, Florence suddenly collapsed. Villagers rushed her to the hospital, but it was already too late. The news of her death reached Patrick, her son, during an important business meeting. At first, he remained silent. Then, slowly, painful memories flooded his mind. His mother trekking long distances to pay school fees, her starving so he could eat, her kneeling beside his bed praying every night, her shaking hands packing his suitcase before he traveled abroad, and the worst of all, the image of the security guards dragging her away while he stood there watching silently. For the first time in years, Patrick broke down completely. He rushed back to the village immediately, but the funeral had already ended. Only her grave remained. The same villagers who once mocked her now stood silently as the wealthy businessman collapsed to his knees before the fresh sand, crying like a helpless child, begging for forgiveness that would never come. Beside the grave rested a small worn Bible and a letter with his name written on it. Inside were trembling words from his mother. My son, I have already forgiven you. A mother's heart never stops loving her child. My greatest prayer is that you will learn to love people before money, because riches without love becomes poverty of the soul. Patrick wept uncontrollably beside the grave, but this time, no amount of wealth in the world could bring her mother back. Moral: never be ashamed of the people who sacrifice everything to make your success possible. A mother's love is priceless. While money, fame, and success can change a person's lifestyle, they should never change their heart. The greatest tragedy is realizing the value of someone only after losing them forever. Thanks for watching.